Hello, and welcome to a special bumper episode of The Company Doctor. We're doing things a little differently this time and bringing you a mashup of two of our most popular careers-focused episodes to help you align your career goals for the coming year. Up first, Gary and I discuss networking, how to do it effectively, and why it's one of the most important ways to diversify your professional opportunities. Where do you begin with networking? And you know, what's the journey?
Well, that's a damn good question. And I'm going to say something that will surprise you, I think, and people listening. I think the place it starts is with I want to talk about serendipity. Mm-hmm. Probably a lot of people listening thinking, what the hell is he talking about and why is he talking about serendipity? Are you thinking that, George?
Yeah, big time. I'm interested to see where this is going because I can't think for the life of me.
No, exactly. So serendipity, I mean, if this was, if we had other people on, I'd ask them what they thought serendipity was. But serendipity is, have you ever had that situation where you went out somewhere, you're in another country in the middle of nowhere, and then you bumped into someone that either knew you or knew someone else?
Yeah.
Kind of a weird Twilight Zone moment. Do you ever come across that?
I have, actually, yeah. I can't think of any examples, but I've definitely seen people in strange parts of the world and thought, I know you from somewhere. And there's been a sort of connection there, which we've then realised and our minds have been collectively blown.
Happens all the time, right? Sometimes at a station in the olden days when you used to be able to travel and bump into someone I hadn't seen for years. What's the chances? And so serendipity is kind of what I would call a meaningful coincidence. It's a meaningful coincidence. And the reason for talking about it now is I want people listening to this to think about creating their own serendipity, their own meaningful coincidences, because here's my story. For those of you that know me, know I don't have much hair, and George, no offense, but you and I have the same aerodynamic hairstyle, I would say.
Yeah, it's a good look.
It's a wash and go thing. And I remember I was driving along and I saw this billboard that said, it was a convertible car. How would you like the wind in your hair? And I thought, you know what? I would love the wind in my hair. And then everywhere I drove, I saw adverts for convertible cars. I think that's what advertising is supposed to do, by the way.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the serendipity is about when you're tuned into something, you're more likely to either see it or make it happen. That's really where I'm going with this. So that's just kind of a quick intro. And of course, it's a whole topic on its own, and some people are a bit deep and meaningful about it, but I just want to kind of just position this first as creating your own serendipity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. Sort of make your own luck almost.
Yeah, absolutely. Make your own luck. Exactly. That's where I want to start. Is that okay? Answer that question first.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I think you need to have that mindset, don't you? You need to be looking out for these coincidences and connections, and that certainly sounds like a good place to start.
Good. So that's the first bit, and then connected very quickly and closely to that, the next topic I want to talk to people about is personal brand.
Right.
I love the way you said right. Like, why? Where are you going? Where are you going with this? Serendipity, personal brand. I thought we'd hear to talk about networking.
Okay. Well, how do these link? Serendipity. You're making your own luck. You're out there. Your eyes are on the potential out there. Personal brand. What is it? What's yours? How does it work?
Right. Okay. The reason I'm mentioning personal brand is that if you eventually get out there and you network, then it's really important to work on your personal brand. Otherwise, people don't really care. So you could be doing putting up all the effort to meet people and to build relationships. But if your personal brand isn't being worked on, and it's you've got to be like Madonna, you've got to kind of keep reinventing yourself, then it will have less impact. That's really what I'm saying. So personal brand is about getting on the radar, I guess. Yeah. If you work for a big company, everyone knows the company. You work for Amazon, people will know the company and they will relate you to that. But if you don't work for a funky brand, or you work for yourself or a smaller business, you've got to work on your own reputation. And that's really what I mean when I talk about personal brand.
And is that a tricky thing to do? I mean, I suppose getting to know yourself is something that you just do throughout your life anyway. How do you sort of figure out what best to put forward to the world?
Oh, it's a good. You're asking good questions, Jules. I like it. Again, it's a big topic on its own, but just as a bit of practical thoughts for people to think about, the first thing is what you stand for. So, those people that know me know I'm a good family man. I like to socialize. My wife and I, we like to go out and party a little bit. So we like to drink, we like to eat, like to travel. And I'm a family man, and my close family and close friends. So that's me as a person. And then the second thing is what I stand for. Well, My habits are all about being on time and doing what I say. If people ask you about Gary, they'll say he's always on time. Sometimes people think I park around the corner just to be there on time. I think I do, actually. I remember I went out with this girl once, and I always turned up at 8 o'clock, and she said, "Do you park around the corner?" And I went, "No, of course I don't. Of course I do." But being on time is an important part of my personal brand, that people know they can rely on me.
Yeah.
And then doing what I say, I'm the first person to turn up if you invite me to a party and the last one to leave. You know what you get with me, and that's my brand. Now, the reason for mentioning that is I haven't kind of put that on paper because I want people to think of me that way. That's what I'm made up of. But now my behaviors need to match that, and that's my personal brand.
Okay. It's interesting, isn't it? Because it's already decided who you are. You just need to play to your strengths and make sure everyone's aware of them.
Yeah, exactly. But I think if people are not happy with their own personal brand, then you can document where you think you are and what's important to you, and make sure you're living it, because otherwise, sometimes you might be contradicting your brand. But just from a networking point of view, if you work on your brand, and I think we're going to cover that in another episode, actually, in a bit more detail, then you've got a framework to work within. And then when you're networking, you're just increasing your chances of people wanting to talk to you, to be honest. I mean, of course, they love whoever's listening to this, they love you, but make them love you more. That's really where we're going.
So that's all really interesting stuff. And we've talked about the importance of the personal brand and how you go about cultivating it. But then perhaps you can talk a little bit about how it's used to your advantage in sort of day-to-day life.
Yeah, it's a bit of a good point, really, because we've talked about changing behaviours and what you stand for. But there you go. You've changed your behaviours, but you're not going to do anything with it. So it's a bit like you get a hole in one, but no one's watching. So better give you some ideas about what to do with it. And just quickly, 3 quick things to share. Now, the goal really for networking is, and the reason we covered personal brand as part of networking, and people were kind of going, what the hell is this? Is we're trying to raise your level of awareness that when you contact people, they're expecting you, they've heard about you, you're on the radar, I guess. And probably the easiest way, and it's a big topic on its own, but just to kind of be succinct, is using LinkedIn. And there's 3 ways to do it. The first one is you need to have an opinion. Now, it doesn't matter if you work for yourself or another company. You want to stand for something in whatever subject area you're in. So have an opinion, write a blog or a post or something short. Doesn't take a lot of time, on a monthly basis. The second one is to engage with content. So if your company has posted something, do a like, but kind of try and do a bit more than that. Maybe have a comment or highlight something you think is important for people to know. And the third one is is for yourself to to interact with the content that's on LinkedIn from other companies. And the combination of those things means that you've got your personal brand, you're on the radar, so people have kind of heard about you, have seen you doing stuff, being active, and hopefully that will leverage your effectiveness when you're networking.
And you can change your personal brand. If you're not happy with how things are, you can alter that.
Absolutely. Surprisingly, the answer is absolutely yes.
Yeah, that is surprising, to be honest with you. Although that said, I think that I would always say that I was always late, for example. So completely the opposite. I was known for always being late, not being unreliable as such. I'm probably not painting myself in a great light here, but I think I've managed to turn that around. So I suppose from a personal point of view, it is a possible thing.
Yeah, so basically you're reliably unreliable. That's fantastic.
Right. Yeah. Okay, right. So I've got that figured out, and I know where I am with my personal brand. What am I looking for next?
Well, the next one is really you've got to contact people, really. But before you do, you've got to plan what you're going to do and what you're going to say, and it actually starts with motivation. There's so many books written on to-do lists and making people more productive, and it's the same with networking. The reason people don't do stuff is they're not motivated to do it.
Yeah.
If I said to you, look, you go turn up at the airport without your passport, and you say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot it." Well, you're still not going to get on the plane, and so you're motivated enough to never forget your passport. I mean, now and then maybe we all do a little bit. You understand what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, if my children are in trouble or there's a real problem, I'll have the motivation to make sure they're okay or do what I need to do. And with networking, you've got to be motivated enough to do it, because it is, it takes effort, and sometimes it's painful and it's difficult. And the doing part is preparing to meet the person, or in these days to speak to the person or video the person. Mm-hmm. And so I want to know about the company. I want to know about the person themselves. Yeah. And things that are current, on Google, or just enough about them that I've got. I call it a blank piece of paper meeting. I'm not turning up with a slideshow, but I've done enough planning. But it looks like I'm cool. So I've got a few things I want to ask them to dig in a little bit more. I call them smoking guns, George.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Do you remember in the old-fashioned movies where someone got shot and the gun was smoking? There was a bit of there's something going on here. Yeah. I want to look for those little smoking guns. So when I talk to people, I want to have what I would call an adult-to-adult conversation. I don't want to be. I'm not subservient. Mm-hmm. Not more important than them. We're just having like you and I. We're having a chat, right? That's what I want to be like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that is really solid advice, actually, and it's something again which has helped me in good stead. I think if you remember that you're in an adult-to-adult conversation, that no one is above anyone else, and that you shouldn't be nervous about contacting someone. I think that's really handy advice. And I also think you're right about it being a mindset. And if you really care, and if you really are driven to create these networks, then you'll put the time every day to making sure it happens.
Exactly. And what a great linking, because I think you're going to ask me what's the next thing we should consider. So the next one is kind of what I would call leverage and momentum, because the worst thing you could do is you go all guns blazing. I'm going to speak to 20 people this month. I'm so into this idea. And then I do nothing. And the classic, I mentioned earlier about, LinkedIn's a good example, because when people are in trouble at work, or they want to change jobs, or they're at risk of redundancy, all of a sudden you see this kind of activity on LinkedIn. It's kind of too late. It's genuinely too late. No, if you want to make this part of your DNA, then you need to be consistent. Now, you don't need to do it do it loads all the time. So if you haven't got the time to do networking a lot, then decide what you can do, but do it the same every week, every month.
Yeah,
that will give you a head of steam, if you like, to make this thing work. And it's part, you know me quite well. I do this all the time naturally, but it wasn't natural at first. And
so you have to work at it.
Yeah, exactly. So you got to kind of, fake it till you make it. Really, just keep doing it until it becomes really natural for you.
And that's become part of your sort of your everyday life now, hasn't it? As in, I've seen you go into shops and leave as the best friend of the person behind the counter. I think
it does annoy my kids though a little bit, as you will know.
I'm not saying anything.
So when my kids were younger, and you know some of my kids, then I used to go for the name badge, so the person in the shop, and I would say, "Hey, how are you doing today?" And building a relationship, because I generally like people and I care about them. And if I'm in an Uber, I'm doing the same. And my wife is rolling her eyes, right? Jane will roll her eyes, but I'm creating an energy. I'm creating a connection. That's the reason for it, and I enjoy it.
Yeah.
But both parties kind of enjoy that, and it kind of really works.
Well, people respond to it, don't they? If you're very much being open and asking interesting questions, not necessarily always, I suppose, looking for smoking guns, because you don't want to be putting someone behind the counter at Costa, under the through the ringer. But I suppose if you're like that all the time, eventually people sort of catch up to you and people respond, and that's it becomes part of your, as you say, part of your personal DNA.
Definitely, and because of that, not intentionally, I'm getting all sorts of gifts all the time. As an example, if I go to IKEA, I normally get more than the 8 Swedish meatballs, because I'm generally interested in people, and I always get at least 12 or 15. Yeah, people forever inviting me to things, or things are happening, and that's back to the serendipity. This is all kind of connected by creating that energy when you're out there. If it's natural, and it could be in events, or it could be on the phone, it doesn't matter. Then it comes back to you. That's really what I would say.
Yeah, and I can vouch for that, having witnessed it firsthand with people sort of offering you stays and wine and all sorts. It's great.
You sound like
see your way.
Blagging things. That's what it's about.
And is there a danger of, and this, I'm sure, at first is terrifying, and when we get to your stage, less so. But is there a danger of making a fool of yourself in an attempt to network? Has that ever happened to you? And have you sort of stopped caring about that now?
Yeah, I guess for people that are listening, I want to maybe counter what I've said, because they're probably thinking, God, it sounds really cheesy. I'm not. Yeah, there is a danger actually that you try too hard, and it actually, when you try too hard, it's repelling to people. Mm-hmm. So it's not like you're in people's faces. That's not really what we're saying. Mm-hmm. But and that is a danger there. I think it's just make it natural. Like we're talking now. If you can take the time to think of other people, networking isn't about what's in it for me. Networking is about what's in it for them, and it sounds like a subtle difference, but it isn't. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to add value to the person I'm meeting. A lot of the times, I'll connect them to someone. They were talking about something. I'll connect them to someone I know. I'm not trying to get money out of it. Mm-hmm. I'll try and help them, and I'm always sitting there thinking, what can I do for them? I know ultimately I want something for me, but that's not. If you worry about that, it'll be repelling and you'll be annoying. Not you personally, but.
Nobody personally, no. But you can spot it a mile off, can't you? You can, rather than networking, people start schmoozing, and it's obviously possible to go over the top.
Yeah, they're sucking up to you. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So we're going to maybe move on now to our final stage of this. Although actually, before we do that, I might wonder if you could probably give some other ways of keeping up the momentum, because I think that's, for me, when I was looking at some of these stages, that was probably the one which I think rang as the most important. I don't know if there are any. Well, obviously LinkedIn is a good thing, but there are plenty of ways to keep up the momentum on a regular basis, I'm sure. Can you think of any others?
Yeah, so I think because you're going to do the research at the as part of the process, and you're going to find out things about that person that might be able to help them. I think the best way to keep momentum is to do things regular and often. So I'm not going to see the same people and drive them mad every week. Mm-hmm. But I certainly would diarise them to get back to them so there's an ongoing conversation.
Yeah.
There's a number of reasons that help with the momentum because you're finding out what's happening in their market, what's happening in their world. So you're more informed. And the more you're informed, the more value you can offer people. Mm-hmm. And so when you speak to the next person, you can kind of share someone in a similar industry or some things that you'd heard. And that's where you create the leverage and momentum. It's not like I'm researching this person, I'm going through the motions. No, I'm genuinely interested. I'm finding out stuff. How do you become an expert? Well, speak to enough people on a topic, and you become one.
Right.
So, that will be one way. And then the other one is to force yourself, because you're trying to create a habit to see. Choose a number. But let's say you decide to choose to speak to, let's say, 10 people a month, which might be a lot to some people and not very much to others. Mm-hmm. Then just get them in the diary and make sure it happens, or do 5. Get started with 5. Yeah, that will help you. It will become a habit. If you do that for 30, 60 days, it will become a habit. Set yourself a goal.
Yeah, and it might feel a bit odd at first, sort of setting a reminder to check in with someone. But I suppose, as you say, once you've done it enough times, it suddenly just becomes part of your life. Yeah,
it's really interesting for me because I find out stuff from people. I enjoy speaking to people, but I find out a lot of stuff that I didn't know, and and then I share with others. So it just keeps you going, and it keeps you on the radar.
Great. Okay, and then finally, I think you said you had 2 more, and then we did 1, and now that leaves us with 1 more. If my maths is correct.
Your maths is genius, mate. I must tell you. I mean, quite so
far. Take us through the final stage. So once we've had our serendipity, we've sort of honed our personal brand. We've made we're regularly making the contacts and keeping up that momentum. What's our sort of final stage? Even though I know that this is an ongoing thing and there is no sort of end to it, what is our final bit of advice here?
Yeah, I've got a heading for this, and because of COVID, we need to adapt this. To be honest, some people are thinking in networking during a pandemic. Yeah, absolutely, more important than ever, right? And the final stage, and you say it is cyclical, so it carries on, is what I call gameplay, because it's kind of showtime. You've done all the preparation. You've worked on your personal brand. You've researched and done the planning. You try to get stuff in the diary to make it happen, and you've done it. You're kind of ready for action, and then you got to take it. So it's the gameplay. It's showtime now. This is it. Mm-hmm. And not just about making it happen, but just making sure it works and learning and adapting from it, so that you can continually be better at networking and enjoy it enough to make it part of your DNA. That's the goal. Let's make this part of our DNA. We really enjoy it. We get a lot out of it. People we speak to get a lot out of it. You've got to add value. But that's what I'm trying to get you to is kind of think of it as gameplay. This is showtime.
Not game playing. not manipulation, but sort of this. You've got you're set up and you're ready to go now.
Yeah, definitely not manipulation. Now, interestingly enough, and this is why I'm talking about the kind of COVID versus non-COVID times. Mm-hmm. Normally, if I'm physically meeting someone, I try not to meet them in the office. It sounds like a really weird thing, but people become very stiff and formal, I don't know why, in the office. All you need to do is hold their hand, take them over the road for coffee when you're allowed to, and they're a normal person. In the office, they're much more formal. I have no idea why. So I do a lot of coaching. It's the same. So I will never coach anyone in the building. I'll always go over the road for coffee and they become a normal person. Then you see when they come back in the building, they get all stiff and much more formal again.
Yeah.
Not always, but that's something to think about.
We're going to switch gears here and pivot towards the ever-popular topic of interviews. How do you interview well? Can you be over-prepared? And what on earth is the gruesome threesome? Luckily, Gary's here to shed some light on these subjects and provide some much-needed unique insight into how to be a better interviewee. Maybe, Gary, you can talk us through the sorts of things we're going to be covering, what people can expect from this episode, what they're going to be walking away with.
Yeah, and actually, what you've alluded to in the intro, we had a very successful audio book a few years ago, about 3 or 4 years ago. It got to number 2 in the business iTunes charts. We're very proud of it. But we thought, timing-wise, good chance to have an update. World's moved on, as we all know, and so have ideas. So 3 really headings. One is about progressive planning. It's all the before stuff. The second one is what I call pilot or participation. It's all the during stuff, when it's kind of when you're in the moment. And actually, the third section, which is slightly surprising probably for some, is what I call the interview hangover. It's the kind of after stuff, what you should and shouldn't do afterwards. There we go. There are 3 things.
Okay, great. Yeah, I like it. I like the format. It's a classic format for right now for us. We can say
3,
there's exactly. So obviously, as you said, we're in a time where people are going to be needing this advice sort of more than ever. And if they're in a fortunate position to have been accepted to come and interview for a job or for whatever it may be, what happens first? Because obviously you've got that elation, haven't you? You've got that sort of great first steps in there, but then you've also got that immediate sort of a little bit of a crushing fear about how.
I was going to say you said elation. I was thinking fear. Yeah, elation and fear.
For me, it's a bit of both.
There's probably a word for that, and someone will come up with it in a dictionary. Like crisis means. Change means crisis and opportunity. There's probably a word for it. Anyway, probably the most important thing to do, and actually, we were talking about this earlier. I think, the other episodes that we've done are a great rehearsal for this. So we're not going to recover some of the things in the other episodes. I really highly recommend people go back to, the networking and out of work one next, because I think they're really helpful to this. But the first thing to do is, we called it progressive planning, but it's really to get underneath the company that you're going to go, obviously, you're going to go and visit, or not, as the case may be, but the company you want to go and work for, and the person, and looking through their lens, we want to get under the covers of as much as we can about what the company's doing, where it's going, and we'll talk about how to do that in a minute. And as much as you can about the people that if you know who's going to be there. If you don't, really highly recommend you try and find out, because that will really make a difference.
Yeah, so absolutely. I mean, this is something which Gary's actually helped me in the past with, and it was an approach which I wasn't really used to. I wasn't really au fait with. But the idea of doing your research on the people, I think, as an initial step, is such an important one, and it's definitely helped me in the past. Yeah,
I think the principle is that there is a small chance that you might know someone who knows them anyway, or knows of them, or knows the company. And anything you can do to, we talked about warm contact in the last one of the other episodes. Anything you can do to make it less cold and connect with the person and the company. A, they feel good that you've taken the time, obviously, and B, you'll have a much better conversation for sure.
And how far should you take that? I mean, obviously, you don't want to be sort of mentioning their pets' names and things like that. How far should you take this research before you go into the interview?
You mean like stalking them on Facebook or tracking their family?
How far? Yeah,
good
exactly.
Point. Well, to be honest, as much as you can, and then obviously use common sense to how you use it. I mean, the obvious ones are a bit of background about their hobbies and things that they like to do. Not that you can kind of pounce on them, but it's good to know, because when you're talking about yourself, you might be able to talk about those, and they go, "Oh, I like cycling," or whatever it is. Yeah. And the other thing is really trying to understand their ambitions. Sometimes you're fortunate when you're doing research, you'll find something that someone's just done an article on them or something, or on the company, and it gives you a chance to pull out those things. But I would go, spend maybe 20 minutes on the company and 20 minutes on the people. It might be more than one. So bear that in mind. Different personalities, different backgrounds. Yeah,
for sure. And does that help with the? Does that help with your confidence as well going into it? You've got a bit of a fallback in case things are going wrong. You can sort of fall back on a bit of research that you've done, or is it purely just to sort of warm up the contact?
Well, no, it's a really good point. It's actually the opposite. It's all about confidence, because basically what we're going to talk about in the planning is the more you plan and you've been through understanding the people and the questions they might ask you, we're going to talk about in a minute, the more confident you're going to be, because any question they ask you, any situation that comes up, is likely that you've already thought about it, rehearsed it, ready for it. So absolutely, it makes a big, if you want to improve your confidence, the best way is to be prepared.
And everyone's got different ways of rehearsing. Everyone's got different ways of sort of going over those sorts of things in their heads. And it's probably different for everybody. But for you, who's coached people on this and who's seen what success looks like in terms of that sort of rehearsal aspect of the preparation, what's the best way to begin? How do you start?
Well, I think if during your preparation, make a little asterisk against things. So a place to look. I just want to add this because I think it really helps. If you're looking up the company, go to the webpage, go to Investor Relations, and in Investor Relations, it will give you. There'll be an annual report in there if they're a public company, and in the first couple of pages, it will talk about their strategy and where they're going. So that will give you some information that you want to go, okay, one of those smoking gun things where I want to kind of go back and ask them some questions about it. And then when you're rehearsing, I would recommend you do this on your own, but do it out loud. Because when you verbalize something, and you're really cool anyway, aren't you? When you are, I know. You're looking in the mirror and go, they're going to say this and I'm going to say that, and it's really quite cool. And then when you're feeling brave enough and you're well rehearsed enough about everything they're going to ask you, then do it with your partner, your friend, and get them to fire questions at you, and just get used to that. They ask me this, I say that. It's likely, if you've done the right preparation, that most of the things you're thinking about and rehearse will come up.
Okay, and it's worth saying that you probably feel a little bit silly at first doing that, because I've definitely done that in the past, just talking to myself in the mirror. And I've had to take that step because I'm very eloquent in my head when I'm sort of thinking I'm the most eloquent person in the world. But as soon as it comes out, it's as I'm sure everyone will attest.
Did I say that? Was it me?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so don't worry about feeling stupid. You probably do look a bit stupid, not you personally, but you probably do feel a bit stupid, but that's okay. Because actually, on the day, as I say, if you've done the right preparation, it's likely that you've already thought through the answer. So I think it's a good thing to do.
And can you prepare for the ambiguous questions that are going to be thrown at you? Can you prepare for the moments where you're sort of stumped and you think, okay, hang on a second, I'm going to need a second to think about this, but maybe I should be saying something to sort of shy away from the awkward silence? Is that something which people should be doing, or should you embrace the silence?
Absolutely. And by the way, you should never be stumped. If you're stumped, you've blown it, I'm afraid. Because if you've done your preparation, sorry to say that, but if you've done your preparation, then things will come up that you're not rehearsed on and you're not comfortable with. But I think it's really a mindset thing. So the confidence comes from doing the preparation, and your mindset should be, I see myself being successful. And as we've talked about before, you get what you expect. So I'm not saying you should be arrogant, because if you're arrogant, you've lost it as well. But be confident enough that they need you, you're the right person for the job, and you see yourself being successful. Then, because you've done all the planning and you're confident, when something comes up that's a bit ambiguous, draw on your experience, or it's okay to say, no, I haven't come across that before. But don't hesitate and say, I'll come back to you. Obviously, you don't get a chance to do that. Yeah. So you've got to have an opinion.
That's good to know, because you can get a bit blustery. Not you, again, personally, but people can.
Probably me as well.
You can sort of start get a bit rambly when they don't know the answer to something. And what else goes into the preparation? I mean, is there any sort of ritualistic type stuff to do beforehand? You've mentioned having this, that telling yourself that you can do this and that you are confident. Is there anything else you can do to help with that confidence in the run up to the interview? And
I'm not going to suggest you do the Muhammad Ali thing where you look in the mirror and go, I'm the greatest, I'm going to make this. You can do that if you want, but it's actually more important to think about the questions they're going to ask you. So think about the role, look at the job description, and think through, use their language, and think about the questions they're going to ask you. There's some obvious questions. It's actually much more obvious than you may think. They're going to ask you, why have you done this before? What experience have you had? Think through all the things they're going to ask you. They're going to ask you about your strengths and weaknesses.
Mm-hmm.
There's some key questions we're going to talk about when we're actually in the participation part, and think through the answer and get someone to rehearse that answer. If you've done that, then list all those questions they could possibly ask. There's not that many, because most people will ask the same kind of stuff. They want to know: have you done it before? Have you, do you know what you're doing? Have you got the experience from? Can you draw on experience from the past? And that will get you to that. That's the most preparation you can do. You've got the questions down. You've done the research about the company and the person. You've rehearsed all of those things in your head and out loud. You're ready. As long as you've done it enough, you're ready.
Even if you do get a curveball, as long as you're confident in your answer, even if it's not necessarily, because a lot of these questions, and you'll know this as an interviewer, a lot of them don't necessarily have a right or wrong answer. It's more just to get an idea of someone's character. And if your character is someone who's confident and cool in a crisis, then regardless of what you say, that's probably
good for you,
the best
right?
outcome.
Now, obviously, there's different formats now. So it might be a video call. You might eventually be able to get out of the house and go physically. There's something to look out for. If you're not wearing a tie, and which is unlikely these days to be doing, if you get a difficult question, the middle of your neck goes red. It's a bit of a giveaway sign, something to look out for. So, I don't know what the answer is. Maybe button up your collar at the top or something. But just
wear a roll neck.
You can look really wear a roll neck. You look cool, but it's just something to look out for.
Yeah, the giveaway signs. And in terms of appearance, is there anything that you'd recommend? Is there any sort of style that means business that you've noticed in the past, or is it just whatever you feel most comfortable in?
Well, you know what? I think it's changed. In the past, I would have said, dress smart, wear a tie, and that kind of stuff. I don't think that's the case anymore. I think you have to dress appropriately. So whether you're male or female, you have to wear the right kind of attire for the work that you'll be doing for the job. So if it's a building job, then you wouldn't wear a suit, and if it's a fashion job, you need to be dressed appropriately. No high heels, George. Don't wear those. That wouldn't suit you.
Okay, that's a shame.
So I just think you need to be professional. You need to be relevant, and just don't stick out like a sore thumb. So you need to be tuned in to where how it might work for them, obviously.
And who's done it in terms of the interviews that you've done in the past? What's been the thing that has shone through most for you in terms of when is it sort of an instant thing? Do you tend to walk in and see the candidate and think, right, within a sort of minute of them speaking, you're thinking, right, this person is great, or is it something which it takes the full interview for you to? I mean, obviously this is going to be different in most cases, but are there any things that people can do to be that instant sort of success?
Yeah, I think probably the most important one is maybe an obvious one is you've got to be able to connect with a person. So you need a kind of energy. You can feel an energy when someone. Don't be wired and fired so you come in and look like you're on drugs or something. But you've got to have you need to kind of up your game a little bit. So if you've not had a great day or you're worried about it, you might come down as kind of a low energy kind of person. So just turn up the energy just enough, not too much. And then secondly, as an interviewer, I'm really impressed if people have done the preparation and they ask me good questions. So they look the part, they're informed, they've taken the time to understand what the role is, what the company's doing, and a little bit about what's happening out there. That kind of thing makes a big difference to me when I'm interviewing.
Is that as much as people can do in terms of their progressive planning? Is there any other little tricks or tips that they can sort of work on before going into the interview itself? Yeah,
there's one more which I would always recommend, because the world is a small place. If you've done that research, find out people that that either know that company, either work there, know someone there, and maybe know the people that you're going to be seeing. Because if you can do that, that's just ups your game a little bit more, because you can find out more from them. You can name drop if it's relevant to those people, and they will check back, by the way, in the other direction with those people. So hopefully it works out for you. But if you do that, you're trying to differentiate with everyone else. So people get off on the fact that you might know someone there and they know you. So I think that would be the only other thing I would suggest.
I suppose it also demystifies it a bit as well and makes it a bit less scary. If you know someone who knows someone who works there, or if you're familiar with the faces or some of the faces that are there, it's not suddenly a sort of faceless, scary company who are there to grill you.
And it's a small world now, so everyone knows someone who knows someone, right? So before you know it, that it's easy to go and find a connection, and it's a better thing to do because you're trying to find the warm contact again, so you're not cold.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
well, your second point was I do like that. Yeah, well, I like it all.
Give me your
the pilot your participation section.
Yes.
Maybe you can explain a little bit what you mean by that, because I love these headings, by the way. And I've got to say, I think I made a snide comment about your
my scruffy
handwritten notes that you sent me. Yeah,
and now I've sent you
the one that you sent this time.
Notes.
Yeah, it's immaculate. So,
I've upped my game, right? I've upped my game for you, George.
Big time.
It's a pleasure. You're welcome.
Exactly.
So basically, pilot your participation is about, you don't get a chance to make a good first impression. You don't get a second chance for that. And I talk it in terms of it's showtime. And interestingly enough, the interview's already started the moment you speak to someone. Now, if you go and visit, and we will visit people again, hopefully. Mm-hmm. If someone comes to collect you in reception, your interview's already started. I don't know who they are. We don't know who they are. They might be someone important or someone not. But everyone says, "What do you think of that person?" at some point. So your interview's already started. And then, secondly, when you're getting in front of someone, it's showtime. You've got to perform, and you've planned for this, so it's not so daunting now because you're kind of ready and you feel good about it.
Yeah.
So probably the non-verbals are just as important as the verbals. It's there's it's the body language. Try to be relaxed. It's an adult to adult conversation. We talk about this all the time. They're not more important than you. You're not more important than them. You're having a kind of an adult to adult conversation. You've got the experience. They need you.
Yeah.
Your job is to connect the two together. That's what this is about. So piloting your participation is you take control. And again, I'm not trying for you to be arrogant, and you're not interviewing them. That's not what this is about. But you take control of this session because this is what you've planned for, and that's what we want to help you with now is to how you would do that. And there is a secret way to do that.
Is there?
Well, if I throw that in, then people might listen a little bit further along the podcast.
Yeah. Stay tuned.
Stay tuned for the killer tip that's coming.
Yeah, and it is. I was going to say, what's that?
No, I thought you want to know what it is.
I do want to know. Yeah, I do.
But
I thought we were going to come to it later, but if we're coming to it now,
we can.
Well, yeah, I'm just worried about you mentioned the arrogant side of things. It is a bit of a thin line, and I just wondered if you've got any guidance for people around that. How to come across as confident and relaxed without coming across as sort of bolshy and arrogant.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good question to ask. You've got to have confident vulnerability. And that's the balance. So you've got to be vulnerable enough that you're interested and you're slightly vulnerable. Do you know what I mean by that? So you're kind of open-minded enough to listen and learn, and then you've got to be confident enough that you know what you're doing and you've got something about you. And if you can find the balance of those two things, that stops you being arrogant. Be vulnerable enough, but don't be too vulnerable as you're needy. Yeah, but be confident enough and not too confident, because then you're arrogant, and it's somewhere in the middle of those two things, I would say.
Confident vulnerability. I love that.
You got it. We can add that to the next T-shirt, right?
Yeah, great. Yeah, stay tuned. And speaking of stay tuned, is it time for the secret tip now?
Oh, I thought you'd never ask. Absolutely. But here, this is it, right? And this is how piloting your participation works. When you go in, obviously, we talked about how you should behave. But the most important thing to do is to ask a question at the beginning of them. And then anchor everything else that you're doing in that session to the answer to this question. Now, obviously, you need to ask the question that's relevant for you, but I'll give you an example. Okay. I might ask, for this role, what does good look like for you? What is the type of person you're trying to look for, and what would make the biggest difference to making this role successful? Something like that. Now, don't copy me. It's not exactly like that. But then, based on that, the answer to everything else I'm going to do in this session is going to be anchored back to the answer to that question.
Okay. So you're putting the onus on them.
You sound like you've got one of those George kind of, I'm not sure about that. Go on, tell me.
Well, I was wondering whether you should... So you're putting the onus on them almost to sort of reveal their secrets almost, and sort of let you know exactly how to be the best for the next 45 minutes. That's why it's a killer question, right? That's why it's a killer question. Yes. Now, obviously, now you're worried that they're going to find you out, aren't you? I'm worried that they're going to see through my ruse, yeah. Yeah,
no, not at all. It's how you say it. But the most important thing is, before I get started, because basically what you're about to do is bore them with your CV, not you personally.
Yeah.
And what we don't want to do is bore people with your CV. What you want to do is you want to make a connection as soon as possible, so that you asked me before, you want them to make a decision as early as possible in this interview that they want you, and then they're going to start selling it to you. Okay. So the way to do it is you ask a question like that.
Should you be as obvious about it as when they're telling you the answer to that question, as taking notes that you can then refer back to throughout the rest of the interview? I mean, that's probably taking it a bit too far, but potentially
no, not necessarily. You could do that. I mean, I don't think you need to do that. I think you could do that, but if that makes you feel more comfortable, I think the main thing is, like for example, they might say, we need someone that is business minded, very good customer experience. I'm just making stuff up, and then as you go through your CV and experience, you're just going to keep connecting back to some of those things. Not in a here's an example of me being customer focused. No, not like that. Well, you can, but you won't last very long if you do that. That sets you up. When
you're going through your CV, as you say, it can be a little bit boring. It's like going through slides sometimes when people just read what's on the slide. It can be a little bit dull, and I'm sure that interviewers, having seen loads of other people, like to have things spiced up a bit. Are there any ways that you, when you're talking through your experience, talking about your CV and articulating your CV, ways of jazzing it up slightly just to make that part of the interview less of a chore? Or is it just a case of relating it back to that initial question?
What they want to do is that they're hoping there's a match. Your job is to show them there's a match. So you don't need to go through the chronological order of your CV. What you need to do is, now they've told you the things they're looking for. And by the way, if they don't tell you, then your preparation has led you to that anyway, because you know roughly what they're looking for. And then your job is to say, look, I won't bore you with my CV, but let me just highlight a couple of things. And don't talk about we. The most annoying thing as an interview is when people talk about we, because it means they haven't done it. There's something called a competency-based interview where I want evidence. My job as an interviewer is to gain evidence that you know what you're doing. You've done this before. So don't talk about we. Talk about, this is what I did, and in my role I did this. I know it sounds a bit ungainly to talk about yourself, but that's what you need to do. Talk about I, don't talk about we.
And when you say don't talk about we, you mean don't talk about we as in the company that I've been working for and the stuff that we've done, rather than rather talk about what I've achieved.
Yeah, because they want to know what you've done. They don't care what your company's done. Because when people say we did this, what they really mean is I didn't do this at all. Someone else did this. And they're looking for evidence that you've done this.
Great. Okay, that's good. And that's definitely something which you can do, as you say, in the preparation section before you get to this part. Going through the CV and figuring out what's going to be relevant to the interview is obviously a crucial thing to do.
There is something else I just want to share with you, because I want to make sure we cover everything. And it's something I call the gruesome threesome.
I saw that written down, and I was unsure how to ask you about that.
So what the hell is the gruesome threesome? So here's the gruesome threesome. Part of your preparation is you need to have thought through these things. They're going to ask you 3 questions. They're going to come up. The first one is, what's your strengths? It may not ask it in this way, by the way. They're going to ask you what your strengths are. It's okay to blow your trumpet. Make sure you do. Think about it. And again, you can connect it back to what they're looking for. The second one is less comfortable, which is about your weaknesses. Now, they're not always going to ask you that directly, what your weaknesses are. They might ask you something about, what would you like to be better at, or something like that. But it's coming. You've got to be prepared, and you've got to give something away. So if you're a project manager, don't say you're not very organized. That doesn't go down very well. But something I say, and again, you don't just repeat what I'm saying, but something I will say is, I'm a very driven person, and it's not everyone's cup of tea.
Yeah.
You've got to give something to them when they ask you that question, but not the crown jewels. Don't give away the crown jewels. And then the third one is, they'll ask you something about why they should give you the job. Why you? I've got lots of people I'm seeing. Why should I give it to you? And you have to have thought through the answer to that question. And that will be vital to make a difference. And again, that's part of your preparation, but it will help you be strong. Those are there's lots of other questions, but those are kind of the gruesome threesome that people fall over on, I'd say.
Yeah, those are the big 3, aren't they? And I think especially the weaknesses one. You have people who say, "Oh, I'm too hardworking," or if anything, I'm on time too much. Yeah. But you're right. You need to sort of say something which is potentially a bit divisive, but is also, it's a strong opinion about something.
And that's part of you being the vulnerable you, but it's not. Yeah. But it is contrived a little bit, I guess.
Yeah, but I suppose they're expecting that, aren't they? They're not expecting someone to say, "Oh, I'm lazy."
Nothing wrong with I'm lazy, or there's nothing. I've done nothing wrong. I never do anything wrong. I'm a perfect person.
I have no weaknesses,
like you.
Yeah, exactly. I'm the exception. In terms of leaving people with a good impression, I mean, obviously the interview itself can go many different ways, but you want to end on a high, don't you? You want to end on a good note and leave them with an impression and differentiate yourself from the other people they've seen. Are there any good ways of doing that, or ways which you've seen people do in the past which have stuck?
Yes, I'm pleased you are. This is something my dad taught me, actually, because I'm old. It was a long time ago, but always ask a bloody good question at the end. So the idea is you ask a bloody good question at the beginning and a bloody good question at the end. That makes you look good. So when they say to you, have you got any questions? You go, oh, no, you've answered everything. Bad answer. If you've, as part of your preparation, think of a really good killer question at the end, and then makes them think, makes you look smart. So, for example, I've done some research on the company that I was seeing, and I noticed they were doing some stuff in China, and they were worried about it because the Chinese were copying everything they were doing in this particular case. So I said, I've noticed there's some stuff going on in China. What difference is that making to this business unit? And they went, oh, let me tell you that. And they'd spend a while telling me what was going on. So I said, but at least you'll ask a question or about where the market's going or something interesting, not a blah blah question. And that is a great way to finish, and it makes you look smarter than
and it feels. And when you have that conversation with them, it feels like you're one of them already. If they're sort of saying, oh well, unburdening their woes on you, you suddenly feel part of the fold, which is obviously, but ideally where you'd want to be by the end of it.
Definitely, I think that's and that's a good way to finish. I would say there's loads of other things, but I think that would be a key one at the end.
Okay, so a question sandwich basically is what we're talking about here. A great question at the beginning, and then,
I like that.
Yeah,
question sandwich, very nice, very nice.
And I suppose good to have one prepared, but then also if you think of one during the interview which you can relate to, then even better, I guess, because it makes it a bit more relevant.
Yeah, actually, that's just reminded me because a big question I get a lot of the time is some people are focusing so hard on answering the question that they forget. So I think about the next question. They forget to what the person was saying, so they kind of lose track of what was going on, like I did just now, really. So a key tip of that is don't worry about the next question. Think about what they're answering and use that as the basis of the next question. Don't worry about the next question and you're going to run out of things to say. Don't worry about that because they're going to ask you more questions than you're going to ask them. But be good at asking questions. I think it's a good degree of common sense to do that.
Yeah. That makes sense. So you've made a memorable exit. You've asked your killer question to leave them sort of absolutely astounded with your intelligence. And then I was really interested to hear about this, the fact that there's a third section to this, because you'd assume that once you've walked out the door, that's it. You can sort of take a deep breath and move on with your day and wait for the phone call. But from what I gather, there is a third section to this. And
I call it the interview hangover because You've done whatever you've done, right? And that's it. And so you leave and it is what it is. And then people go through this kind of panic and I didn't say everything I should have done. When I was looking in the mirror, I was much better than this. It is what it is, right? But then the key question that people always ask is, well, should I follow up? Should I call them? Should I wait for them to call me? And it's a bit like dating, really. It's all a bit, shall I, Jonathan? Well, And my view of this is, I'm going to kind of contradict myself a bit. If they want you, they want you, right? It's not going to change. If you call them, they're not going to suddenly go, well, actually, yes, I do want you.
Yeah,
so,
that's true.
And most companies, they have a very difficult process of getting things done. They might want someone else to interview you. It may not just be one person in the room, by the way. We haven't spoken about that. So, if they want you, they want you. So, but if they haven't had the courtesy to come back to you, then you can, after maybe a week and a half, you can follow up with them. But the truth is, you're probably best not to. And not everyone would agree with me, but my thoughts are that, if I want to work, it's a two-way street, right? If I want to work for that company and they've not got the courtesy to come back to me, then, maybe I don't want to work there. Now, on the other hand, I do understand that process is pretty longer than you think. Having done it, it's quite difficult internally to get things moving. So, give them a bit of time, But if after 2 weeks they've not come back to you, it's not looking good, I think.
Yeah, no, for sure. And what are your views on calling for feedback? So, sometimes you'll get an email or something saying, you've been unsuccessful, and an email is obviously a bit of an impersonal way of doing it and sometimes a bit annoying, but is it worth calling up and saying, what did I do right? What did I do wrong? Just sort of as a bit of a learning curve? Yeah,
I think it depends on the way you're wired, right? I think so. I think most people are not very good at interviewing and they don't like giving bad feedback, right? So therefore you'll hear stuff that probably isn't true about why you didn't make it. And by the way, it's really important throughout the whole process to never be defensive. And therefore, at the end, you don't want to leave a bad experience, like being annoyed with them, because it's a small world and everyone knows everyone else, right? So during the interview, and I just want to reiterate this, at no point should you be defensive. So if you ever watch The Apprentice, when they do the interview part, the thing that people fall over on is that the interview is trying to get their goat. And the secret is to not tell them whether your goat is tied up, right? So never just never be phased. And likewise, a part of the feedback, if you're not their cup of tea, then you're not their cup of tea. It's not, it's probably not your fault. It is what it is.
Yeah.
But I would ask, because I say, I really want to learn from this. Don't give me the kind of the usual feedback. I get it. Who knows? It's a small world. We may meet again. I'd really appreciate you telling me.
Yeah. So don't burn bridges.
Definitely don't burn bridges, because it will come back and bite you. It's a small world. Everyone always asks, do you know this guy? Because it's easy to find them. And if they say, I interviewed that person, and they started crying afterwards, or pulling in my hair, it will come back and bite you. That was what I would say. Yeah.
And equally, if you've done a really good interview, but there was someone who was slightly more experienced or slightly better, but they know of another role coming up elsewhere, then they're going to be more likely to recommend you if you sort of go out with grace and confidence.
Yeah, definitely. And also, maybe the person they had in mind, you came second, that person said no, and all right, maybe you're not the first choice, you're the second choice. That's okay. I'm cool with that. Yeah. So they don't know how good you are at the moment, and they made a mistake, and they can come back to you. So you never know.
Well, listen, I think we've covered those three sections. I think there's been some really useful stuff in there. It's definitely sort of stuff that I wish I had known about sort of 3 or 4 years ago, or even about 6 months ago. But anyway, that's a different story. But as always, we're going to do our 3 key takeaways. And I think there's a lot there to choose from. But if you had to choose 3, Gary, of things for people to take away and dwell on before their interviews, what would they be?
So I've got 3 takeaways that actually are really 4 disguised as 3. The first one is preparation and rehearsal is massively important. It gives you confidence. It gets you lined up. It's so valuable, but definitely verbalize it, because your mind will be ready and tuned in. The second one is definitely ask a killer question at the beginning and at the end. Don't forget to do it. You don't have to ask the question the way I asked it. You can probably do it better. But definitely have a question at the beginning, because you're going to link to it, and have a question at the end so you show that you're smart. And the third one is, please don't be defensive at any time. Have good energy and expect to succeed. Expect to do well, because they need you. So those will be my 3 takeaways.
There you have it. A careers power pack handcrafted by the company doctor to stand you in good stead for whatever the next year brings. In our next episode, we'll be discussing the company doctor's strict anti-New Year's resolutions policy and what exactly that means. Until then, we hope you've enjoyed this and all the previous episodes of The Company Doctor, which can be found at thecompanydoctor.com, and look forward to seeing you next time.